Hello everyone, this is Matt with the Grappling Podcast, and in this episode, Levi and I discuss the idea of taking training breaks to help improve your total outcome of learning jiu-jitsu over the course of a year. More specifically, you can expect to learn what a deload is and how to apply them, why redlining it and training constantly may not actually give you the long-term growth you're looking for, and why measuring your training and progress in months and in years may actually give you the best results. So we tried to keep this episode punchy and all wrapped up in about 30 minutes. So if you end up enjoying it, please share it with a friend. So without further ado, here are some thoughts on deloading for jiu-jitsu.
Oh, it's going to be...
Now we're
Are we
good
live?
to go.
Okay. I thought you could do the 3, 2.
No, you're just asking me if we're alive and I'm just shaking my head no.
Are we alive?
I hope so.
You
know,
don't
at
know?
some point when someone's listening to this, there's a possibility we won't be.
That's scary.
Isn't that weird?
If you had a funeral, if someday you had a funeral,
Someday I probably
would
will.
you want like a message at your funeral? Like, would you be one of those guys who'd be like, hey, everybody, like have this video, like I'm dead. And I'm, like, I don't know.
Never even thought
I thought about that. I mean, I remember as a teenager, I was like, imagine having like a video will that like you just sit and record like, hey, you're watching this because I'm dead. And this is what I want happened. And this gets this. And this person gets
if you had
that.
a lot of stuff to give away, that might be a good idea. Because then it's like,
This feels like very much like a movie, like, you are watching this because I have passed on.
Yeah.
And this is what I
You're
want to
watching
give.
this.
I don't know.
I
But I imagine at a
two of the
funeral.
contraptions, one on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
Name of that movie.
I have a treasure buried
No.
somewhere. Go now. But I don't know. Like I thought, like maybe at a funeral that you could have something where, I don't know, like to calm everybody because everyone's like, it's just a sad thing that you're dead and everyone's there that you're sad.
I'd want to give a bawling party.
A bawling party.
Just a party
That's
that
what
just
everyone
everybody
says.
has a good time. But maybe I would have to wait for it.
Yeah.
To be like a year after my passing.
Do you remember we were just talking about potato salad before?
Yeah.
I almost completely lost my taste of potato salad because I think it was when my grandma or my grandpa passed away. They had a big after party. Lots of I'm thinking like
Bring a dish.
bring a dish type of thing. Yeah, that's what it was. But for whatever reason, my family, not my own family, but her side, lots of potato salad, and we had literally like buckets of potato salad left over. I don't know why they got so much potato salad. It was like
family is big
Yeah,
on this potato salad.
it wasn't me. It was like maybe just like catering or whatever. Like, oh, bring potato salad, and it was like I had a ton of potato salad left, and I was like, it was good for the first couple days, and then it was just like, oh my gosh, we're overloaded on potato salad.
This is a great segue to today's topic. Too much of a
Too
good
much of
thing.
there you go. I did it right.
Too much of a good thing can be sometimes detrimental to you.
Interesting.
So today's topic, folks, is about deloading. And I know that's a topic that a lot of people haven't probably heard of before, unless you're like in the strength conditioning world. It's been a topic for a long time in that space. And it's really the structure of today's episode is I wanted to bring people through what a deload is, why it's important to deload, like why it can actually improve your training.
Sure.
How to apply deloads, what it should look like in practice, or like what are practical applications. And then I got a few other thoughts on the topic.
I think if you don't practically deload or find ways to structure that into your training, this is where it becomes a very commonplace in jiu-jitsu, which is the burnout.
Yeah.
Burnout or people plateauing.
Hold on, wait.
I should say.
We're going to the why. We should probably just talk about the
You
what.
want to structure this? Otherwise,
let's
it's
talk
my
about
thoughts.
the what, and then let's talk about the why.
Talk about the what?
Yeah, so what deloading is.
Okay.
So here's what, and I didn't look this up. This is just my own knowledge. By the way, I am not a sports scientist, but I do actually have quite a bit of time in the strength conditioning
That's
space.
true.
I used
You
to
do.
own a gym, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So deloading is really the concept in strength conditioning where an athlete intentionally takes planned, sometimes unplanned, but typically planned weeks off of training, or you have it just be easy training. So really the whole idea of it is it's an intentional time frame in your training plan where you reduce fatigue. Boom. That's what you're trying to do. Reduce fatigue. So that's where I wanted to start with it. But like, let's jump over to what you were saying. Cause like, so why is deloading a big deal? I've got a couple things here, but I think you were on a really good point.
Well, I'm just want to make sure it's on the same track. Like I can add my color commentary.
Okay.
into
Okay.
It, but so what it is?
So, well, the reason for it is when you take a little bit of time off, you allow your body to heal. I know that's not radically complicated, but it's actually something people don't think about a lot of the time where, jiu-jitsu, especially combat sports, you're going to take some damage. right? So strength training, you take some damage, but luckily the training is actually like very safe in terms of you know what you're going to be doing that day. In jiu-jitsu, your body's going to get put in some wacky spots. You're going to apply force in weird ways. And sometimes you get little minor tweaks and things like that. Sometimes they heal in a day or two. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but really it comes down to also preventing them before they get worse.
Yeah, I think notorious jiu-jitsu culture is filled with people who have like tons of injuries. I've actually fought against this hard where a lot of people would assume like when you do jiu-jitsu all the time, not all the time, but like you do jiu-jitsu a lot, you're going to get a ton of injuries. And I never liked that mentality of just people saying eventually you're going to get
sell
hurt.
Memberships there.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're going to get all hurt. But it's also something where I'm like, it's not like me trying to ignore a part of a jiu-jitsu culture. Like, yeah, you actually are getting hurt all the time, but we're not going to point it out. I'm saying that I think good, proper training structures and cultures prevent injuries a lot.
I would agree with that completely.
The preventive side. But when injuries do happen, I can't remember who I was talking with the other day. Something about that was saying there's not a lot of injuries that we see in the studio that are related directly to the activity we're doing. It's not like someone's elbow is broken or shoulder or leg or whatever. I mean, obviously sometimes there's a little tweakness that happens if something's going deep, but it's usually like a weird bump, a weird hand post, something that kind of happens that people get injured.
Someone falls weird.
Yeah, always something like that. But the problem is people who are very diehard jiu-jitsu athletes will keep going on training despite like a notable injury.
Yeah.
Right? And that becomes difficult because there are some things that you can do either as far as like taking time off, which can be difficult.
We did an episode on dealing with injuries.
Yeah, and Matt talked about as well to say like, or Matt gave me the example when he was, which was it, your ankle that you hurt? That you switched to butterfly guard training, things like that?
Today was the first day I've stood on it, really.
Yeah, so you can like adjust your training, but the problem is that most people just keep on doing their jiu-jitsu training as if nothing's happening. They endure whatever injuries, but then that's where I think the problems start occurring. It's like you keep stacking injuries at that point, and then it's like, you become this big ball of pain, and then pretty soon you're like, I can't do jiu-jitsu anymore. It's like, well, if you would took those little pauses, the longevity adds way much more to it. And I've got strategies and stuff off the top of my head of like how people can manage during deload periods. But I think I'm not sure.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
So some other reason to deload too, like Levi was talking about, is you're like trying to like head off injury at the pass. Because so here's the thing. If you train hard in really any physical activity, at some point you're probably going to get an injury. Mm-hmm. Some sports are more prevalent than others, and that's okay. But it's just part of the game. But the thing is, if you have planned rest periods in your training plan throughout the year, like the chances that you're taking time off and you're healthy or healthier versus being forced to take time off. So now you are in control as long as you can stay disciplined with it, because it's like nature will make you take a week off or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10.
Sure.
Or you can plan it. So like it's going to happen either way. Best to be in your control.
So how does that look like with a planned deload?
So that's where we actually get into like mesocycle planning.
Okay.
So for those who don't know, a mesocycle in strength and conditioning is when you end up, it's like your training block is a way to think about it. And, you essentially have like your week, how you're going to structure your week. Those weeks roll up into multiple weeks, which rolls into your, essentially your mesocycle. And then you can keep like rolling those things up and whatnot. And you can have like, like when people do like runs for the Olympic or like take a stab at getting to the Olympics, they'll have training plans that stack, and they have a whole long-term plan set out, like usually, or I should say they probably do. But.
Does that look, when you're having that deload, does that look like not going to the gym?
I think it can.
Okay.
I think it depends, because on one hand, by the way, just to finish the thought on the mesocycle, and the point of a mesocycle is a planned progression through all of the physical stimuli you're going to be getting. You ramp it up. You start a little bit easier and you ramp it up all the way to the end, usually like 3 to 6 weeks long is a mesocycle. And then you take that week to bring your fatigue down. And then the next week you start a little bit easier and you work your way back up. And the whole idea is that you're essentially doing this like stair-stepping process of getting up to a higher level of ability. But as far as what that week can look like, you could either just take the entire week off if you're really feeling it. That's actually what I typically do. Just because I actually try to plan my deloads around work things that I have, because I travel for work. You could come in, you could do maybe 50% of the hard rolls if you're feeling pretty decent, but you still want to get some work in. You could even say, hey, I'm just going to come in and do class, but not do any rolls. Or maybe only do positional stuff that you feel comfortable with. And the whole idea is that you want to take an entire week or maybe 5 days. You'll have to really define it for yourself, but enough time that by the end of it, you're just like scratching to get back into jiu-jitsu. It also covers the mental aspect then, right? You're reducing fatigue physically, but also mentally.
Yeah.
You talked about burnout earlier.
Yeah.
Right? That can be a physical thing. It could also be a mental thing.
Yeah.
You're just not as sharp and committed. I'll tell you what, taking a week off, it'll make you go like, oh, just got right back in there. I'm losing all my skills.
Come back.
And so like you've actually taken time to let your fire rebuild.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I get that. And I think sometimes too, I think it was Craig Jones was talking about this, to say it's interesting how people think that training hard or training effective training effective means training hard. Like to say like you're going intensity wise, like you're rolling with people and you're just going hard and sweeping and all this kind of stuff. Like you're going really intense with it, versus having a practical build. And I'm not sure if it was you that was saying this before, but that Gordon gets tapped all the time in training. And you imagine the egos of some people going like, I tapped Gordon Ryan and go and went like, dude, he would literally let his foot get broken by a toe hold in competition, then tap out. So to me, when I see people like that training in a training environment, I think they all realize that training environment is all about skill and technical development. They don't care at all about winning or losing because you're building yourself for those events and those moments. It's like constant training camps, like you're developing skill sets versus sitting here just playing your strength over and over and over again and freaking out when you're in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Like you're sitting here purposely developing these things. And so I say that because when you're training, I think this will help out a little bit with burnout, is the fact that you're trying to work your mental game. You're trying to work your strategies and what you're going for. You're not just going balls to the wall with someone and trying to beat them versus developing like a skill, you know. And sometimes if you're just going A game all the time, I think you'll get burnt out a little bit versus like having fun with the creative process of it.
Yeah.
Say, I want to play with this. I want to, you know, work on a couple of these angles. But I think just the training intensity, it means that when you come in, like don't sit there and say, I have to train hard every single time. I mean, that's the biggest joke of jiu-jitsu, right? Was like, oh, we'll go light. We'll like slap up, and then no one goes light because people start scaling up. But like to Matt's point, I think if you kind of set those boundaries for yourself a little bit, usually the term gets thrown around like flow sparring, rolling, that you can kind of go through the movements a little bit. That works more the mental stuff without the intensity of it. So I'm just trying to kind of figure out ways to say if your deload involves being at the gym still, like what could that look like?
I think the biggest thing is, sorry, I'm going to say something controversial here.
Do it. Hot take.
Don't train with a bunch of white belts.
Matthew. That's
Sorry,
so
white belts.
mean.
Sorry, white belts. And if you're a white belt, this applies to you too, though. Like,
don't train with the white belts.
Don't train with a bunch of like no stripe white belts. Not because they're not people or anything, but just because.
Did you say they're not people?
I said not because they're not people.
That's what I meant. Like, it's just like
they're people.
They're people too. They're just like us.
I was a white belt. But no, and I'm not being elitist about it. Just because, you know, honestly, like most of the time when you get banged up, it's from someone not knowing what they're doing. They don't know how to regulate their intensity.
And it's not like intentions on them.
No. Yeah,
they just it's that kind of anxiety build.
I totally hurt people by accident when I was a white belt. I was definitely that guy.
That is kind of a fascinating concept.
It's a coin flip rolling with me.
I will. It's a coin flip.
Either I was going to get hurt or you were going to get hurt.
That's true. One of us is going down.
One of us is walking away with an injury.
I like that idea a little bit as a really rough guideline.
Yeah, and honestly, yeah. Like, for instance, we have some great people in here, so I could totally train with them.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying from a general broad brushstroke, like, and honestly, like once a white belt has their like first stripe, you're probably good to go. Like,
I would say you could
someone really new.
You could
really
scale that, and I will give a little bit of a controversial take too.
Ooh, okay.
Smaller than you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what's like Street Fighter, like playing on the training mode or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So it's like you're kind of getting your jiu-jitsu in, but this person has like zero threat against you.
Or maybe just like, though you can still have threat though.
Step into the kids class and just do the kids class for your rolling.
The kids class, folks.
Get your sparring in that way.
But there is something to be said about like if someone, even if like, also I noticed a lot of the like some of the smaller folks that are your school here at where we train. at Theory Jiu-Jitsu located in Appleton, Wisconsin. They're all super technical though, so you'll get really good rounds with people, and they're not gonna sit there and sit on your face.
Yeah,
and just like you're gonna get probably beat, but like
I would say
okay.
probably to avoid the people that you normally have good contested roles with.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to put that.
It doesn't mean that the training culture should be enough to say like, hey, I am X and X. And this is what I'm saying with the deload, to say like, I think those, if I'm giving another generalized statement, I think you can't have that conversation with people who are your regular fellow gladiators, because I think you'll naturally progress.
That's like, not you though.
What's that?
Because we've done light rolls.
They have happened.
Yeah, we've done a lot of light rolls.
But it becomes more of like a firmer conversation. Like if you really are just saying, I need to take it light, like I will respect that. But I think like with Matt's point with the white belt, I have a very scalable intensity range of my gear shifts. I could be like half asleep if I want to. I could really turn it up if I want to. So I can really shift depending on what people need and want. But a white belt doesn't have it. They have, it's interesting. Imagine visualizing as gear shifts, and a white belt is only on the 6th gear.
Yeah.
And as you progress more, you are able to like have the gears go down. Like you're able to start at the 1st gear now as you get more experienced.
And by the way, I have a disclaimer to say so I don't take a bunch of heat.
Oh no.
Okay, so when I'm saying like don't train with a bunch, like a whole room full of white belts kind of thing, I'm imagining a generic room. Not like there's like no like, this is like generic thoughts in my head where I'm like, a room full of 30 brand new people.
Yeah.
That's not where you do your deload. Like that's like the way that I wanted to kind of
Well, and this is why I added on to it that I would say if you had to sounds like a weird word, but like focus on people who are smaller than you. I'm not even saying same size or bigger. Someone who literally is not even like a physical threat to you then either. Because you can go against a white belt who's bigger than you, and that's just a really not a good case.
Even a smaller white belt though, they could still hurt you.
I'm saying if you are training with a white belt, it would have to be something smaller.
I'm gonna rewind this a little bit.
Okay.
I think it's that you also need to like, don't go with someone who's going to have no control over their intensity. That's actually what I'm saying.
That's what I said.
That's what I'm saying. So because they could be bigger than you.
Yeah.
Because like for instance, we've got some people here that are bigger than me that I would totally trust to roll with on a deload.
Yeah.
Because you just communicate to them and they would go.
I would say it's like we were talking earlier today about like having that ability to have those connections with people. Like you'd have to have someone that you're really trained with often that can understand you're in this place where you're deloading or you're taking it easy for whatever reason. I mean, it's the same thing saying if I have an injury, I would hope that you don't go towards it. You know, I'm saying I'm going to participate in this role right now, but I'm doing it with a handicap. Like to say like, I can only participate in this if you tell me that you're not going to attack my elbow, which sounds weird, but this is why we have our red bands here to like give people
the red bands are great.
The highlight for it. But to say, but if no one respects that, I can't train with you. It's like, sorry, injuries happen, weird tweaks happen. Like,
so you have to be with someone who can modulate their intensity. Because like here, shout out to Dusty when he came to visit. I was injured, and he is a bigger guy than me, and he's better at jiu-jitsu than me. He was awesome to roll with. I did not feel like I was going to get hurt at all. And he was doing some great technique. He was like being really awesome about it.
I would say with experience and the right training culture, you should be able to shift down.
Yeah.
Because I should say that a brown belt or black belt by default will have the ability to shift. I think that comes from a training environment that allows for people to work, I'm not of the mentality to say, well, if you don't like working on something hard or something difficult, then jiu-jitsu is not for you. I don't mean that people can experience obstacles or difficulties, but it's like there should be a middle balance between both of giving people room to grow under resistance versus smashing someone and going super light on someone, giving someone this illusion like, hey, look, you're escaping my mount or you're escaping, whatever positions, like not having delusion about it.
Okay, folks. So that took us a little bit to unravel that thought, but I think there's a solid thing there.
I think there's some gold nuggets in there.
Yeah. So
somewhere.
Because so that to condense that whole entire like process of us trying to figure out what we were trying to say. Yeah. People who are respectful, good training culture, and make sure they can modulate their intensity. If you're deloading, dodge rolls, folks. If someone if there's that, super athletic, super big person don't roll with them on your deload week.
Yeah.
That's too intense for what you're trying to accomplish.
But
here.
it's like you said, the experience allows you to downshift and to be respectful. But if you never have experience doing that, they don't get it. Like they'll just go at that same intensity. You know, like we're just rolling. This is what I go at. It's like, no, you have to be able to.
If they're still in the tight clench phase.
Yeah. Ugh.
Don't
remember
deload with them.
I had one technique session with somebody, and they were in California, and they literally grabbed my hand so tight that their nail carved across the top of my hand. Like, wasn't rolling. It was like grabbing like this and just
doing technique.
Yeah, like some sort of what was it? I can't remember what the technique was, but it was like drilling something. But he was so tight.
So you weren't even like live drilling.
There was no rolling aspect.
Oh my god!
He was so anxious and tight. And his hand just carved across my hand, and just
that guy's listening. You need to stop doing that.
I know. I was so upset though, because I was at the Gracie Academy, and I was all excited to it was like right after that we were sparring and rolling, and I wanted to work with all these, top level people. But it was like one of those cuts that was like surface level cuts, so it would not stop bleeding.
And it's on a stretchy part.
Yeah, it's on a stretchy part. I'm sitting here trying to stop it. I mean, it was carved across the top of my hand, and I'm sitting here with paper towels and whatever. It was too long for a Band-Aid, and was like, now I'm sitting here being upset. Like that person was so tight. And I get it. I empathize with someone having that anxiety, but it's like that kind of stuff is like, you got to help mitigate that from day one. It's like, if you're that tight that you're just, your nails scratching across my hand, it's like, there's some deep anxiety going on at that moment.
So the conclusion there is don't deload with that person. don't deload with Scratchy McTwitchy. And
Twitch.
Yeah. Because you don't want to get hurt. And honestly, because the whole point of the deload, you're intentionally choosing a week to not take a step forward. It's kind of like 3 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step just not even moving, or no step. It'd be like 4 steps, take a rest.
I don't even exactly recall what we were talking about with the injuries, of how we were mitigating injuries from our previous podcast. How long ago was that podcast?
Maybe like 10 or 15 episodes ago.
That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, but we were talking about, and maybe I'm wrong, but we talked about some different various things that people can do to be able to still train.
Sure.
Maybe if they feel comfortable to. We're not doctors, blah, 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 blah.
I would say if you're deloading and staying at home, though, I would say, like to Matt's point, to not engage with jiu-jitsu that much.
Yeah, if you're taking the week off.
If you take a mental week off.
Yes. And I don't even strength train sometimes this week.
Yeah.
Remember, this is actually a good point. Don't use your deload week if you're taking the week off from jiu-jitsu. So by the way, I take a deload week every 4 to 6 weeks. And sometimes I come in and just have an easy week. Some weeks I take the whole week off. Don't do a bunch of other physical training in its place, because you just negated the reason you took the deload.
Yeah.
You're going to start training again and you didn't reduce your fatigue. So make sure you reduce your fatigue. And here's something to think about. Are you trying to get better over days, or are you trying to get better over years, months, decades? That's where a deload and that style of thinking, you're playing the long game, comes into play. Because you don't get any brownie points for going super hard, getting a massive amount of injuries, and then stopping training after 2 years.
I think I see that often, quite honestly, with purple belts and above. And again, I'm generalizing, but usually when someone's a purple belt, they've shown that jiu-jitsu is like a part of them and a part of their life. Like this is their outlet and their thing to, keep themselves sharp and, whatever check boxes in their life. And I think those people naturally will ebb and flow with their time.
Yeah.
I've seen with people where it's like, hey, was on vacation, or I was, busy with work or whatever. But it's like those kind of people that just jiu-jitsu is always going to be there for them. But they're not I got to be here 4 times a week, 5 times a week, and just train hard all the time. But
yeah, it's kind of it's in your DNA at that point.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Take a little bit of time off, you're good to go. So that's a couple other things on deload. So I usually deload either when it's planned, that's what I do, and or when I'm feeling really beat up, I'll take a couple days off sometimes, and I just do a mini one.
Is there signs that if people aren't prescribing to every 5th week or 6th week or something like that they're planning on it? Are there early signs that maybe someone should take a deload week?
I don't have any scientific stuff on this, but so here's in the strength training world, it's usually when your progress starts to stall.
Yeah.
Because that's a very measurable thing.
Sure.
If it's stalling and you can't make progress week after week, you're you're feeling just incredibly beat up. You're like, when you're on the verge of an injury sometimes.
I would think as far
thing. When I feel massively fatigued, like when I just like don't want to be at jiu-jitsu, I'll usually take that day off. And then if it's not part of my normal plan scheme, but if I this last week, I deloaded. The week before that, I wasn't able to train much either. So I kind of had like 2 good weeks of like rest and recovery from jiu-jitsu. And I just kind of plan it. Now I'm going to train probably pretty hard for the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Nice.
Take another easy week.
I would say if you're having a roll tonight, like what Matt was saying about lack of progress, I feel like if you feel like you were frustrated more than normal maybe of your rolls for a night, I think that could be a sign to say
take a night off.
Take a night off or take another day off or whatever. It doesn't mean to say I quit jiu-jitsu, this sucks for me. But if you don't have this like ebb and flow in your mind of like, ooh, some good things, some bad things, and you're kind of taking the pros and cons of every situation and kind of leaving the mat with good energy. Like if you have a good training session, good group, you should have this kind of it's like a good workout, right? Like you should feel like elated or not elated, like elevated and feeling good, but just like a weightlifting workout. Like if you end with it and you're going like, I felt like crap. I felt like I couldn't lift well and things like that.
I still feel like crap.
Yeah, like
that's the trick, right?
It didn't add to your day.
You started and ended feeling like crap.
Yeah.
Sometimes you start feeling like crap, but you end feeling good.
Well, and sometimes people will come to jiu-jitsu feeling like crap during their day, and then it improves their day. So if it's not adding that's
happened to me a million times.
A positive element after your training session, and you're driving home and you're more than normally frustrated with how things went, you couldn't do anything, that's probably a time. I've had a couple of those days for sure where it's like my body's just acting weird and, I'm just not as sharp, and I'm just like people I normally would be having no resistance against me, that suddenly now they're a pain in my butt. Yeah. That night, it's just like, that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, maybe I should take a day or two. And I like the wording Matt used of like, you kind of get that fire back a little bit.
Yeah.
You're not taking from the resources too much. Like you let the fire grow back a little bit, and now you're hungry. I want to get back into it. So.
Totally works. And here's another heuristic for everyone too. If you get done with your rolls and you're like hurt, like you're hurting in multiple areas, that might be a good sign to take an easy week.
That's true.
Also, if you're like radically altering your game, and then you alter your game again because of injury, and then you alter your game again because of injury, and you're stacking injuries and if you're having to alter your game constantly, that might be a sign you might need to take a little bit of time to heal up. And sometimes there's this idea that Renaissance periodization puts forward, that they've got a lot of great stuff on YouTube, by the way, folks, if you want to learn more about strength conditioning and and just training and stuff like that. Oh, shoot. I was just plugging. I forgot what I was going to say.
It sounded so good. You said something about Renaissance.
Before Renaissance periodization.
Sorry, everybody. It flew away.
Yeah, that one just flew away. I forgot. Well, I'll have to bring it up at a different day. I don't want to waste everybody's time here.
So deload. Make sure you take care of yourself. Jiu-jitsu is a very fun activity. Just like with anything in life, you have to make sure you balance it with everything else.
Yep. I have one more thought.
Yes.
If you train 1 day a week, you probably don't need to deload. Just so you know. You can if you want, but it's just
true. I would say that.
You're not accumulating enough fatigue. You're actually reducing it by the time you hit your next session. It might even apply to 2 days a week. If you train 2 days a week, you're doing no other extra S&C, and maybe you don't have a high stress situation in your life. And if you feel like you can keep training. Maybe take the holidays off, and then just you'll be good. But
I think that's that weird balance, because like if you relate it to weightlifting, if you only train once a week, you're not going to see progress, and that might dishearten you to keep training.
Yes.
If you train 5 times a week weightlifting, you might go, I'm feeling burnt out, and I don't want to weightlift anymore. So I think there's got to be this like Goldilocks zone that you've got to find yourself at least averaging twice a week. Average, I say that because 1 week you do 1 week you do 3 maybe, but if you average twice a week, you'll see progress.
Yeah, probably pretty good progress. That's honestly a lot of the time in the January through March, April time. That's what I train 1 to 3 days a week.
1 to 3 days. I mean, it's a good Goldilocks zone. That way you're having fun. You're hanging out with your friends. You feel like you're picking up some things. So I would say that's a good spot to hang out.
I like it. So there we go, folks. I know we ran around on a couple different small rabbit trails, but it all came down to the idea of why we deload.
Did we deload off topics?
Yeah.
We were doing other jiu-jitsu topics.
Yeah.
Like we got to talk about deloading.
Now I feel refreshed to talk about deloads
There
again.
you go. We can do that.
Yeah, remember, take a week that's either easy or off every 4 to 6 weeks. Don't just stop showing up, though. Make sure to build the habit of going to jiu-jitsu. That's really important. And
or at least experiment with it.
Roles, yeah.
Experiment with a week off and see how your brain feels at the end of it.
Yeah.
You know, do you feel refreshed? Do you feel like you have a little bit more vigor in you? Like, see how those days. And if you're a diehard right now and you go like 5 or 6 times a week, you know, I get it because it feels like you don't want to have dust accumulate, but take a couple days off, focus on some other things. I always say that because let's say in life, things get really crazy. Sometimes doing stuff like jiu-jitsu allows your brain to relax from other things in life, and your brain can kind of come to some levels of conclusions that you couldn't see through the anxiety. I think the opposite is with jiu-jitsu, that sometimes you're just overloaded with jiu-jitsu and you take time off of it. You'd be surprised how much connections get made and you feel better about your activity. So.
There's also some research that if you are strength training, you usually come back from your deload stronger. So you might even come back better at jiu-jitsu.
So when people do deload, that just means that you're lifting lighter weights but doing the same workouts?
So there's the idea I was going to talk about before.
There we go.
It's the idea of active recovery. Yeah. Where you deload 1 week and then take the entire other week off. You do that a couple times a year to massively reduce fatigue. You really won't lose much muscle or strength.
Someone was saying about you're going through like the neurological pathways. Like if let's say you're like lifting still, but let's say you're lifting at 50% of what you normally do.
That's usually cut your volume or your reps. You know, you essentially take like week 1 of your mesocycle, cut your like volume or reps in half about is usually maybe
that's a good topic too. Like maybe if you say 50% instead of going completely zero, maybe if you go 4 times a week, maybe 1 week, then you go twice a week. You go 2.
As long as you don't go crazy those 2 days.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's like that active recovery that's like you're just moving and gives you more time offload.
But honestly, with jiu-jitsu, I just take an entire like usually week off from rolling.
Experiment, people.
Yeah, play around with it. Or 5 days.
You want to keep the love going with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, don't stop going to jiu-jitsu because you took a deload.
Yeah.
That is the truth. Remember, you're building blocks. Is essentially every training block you do is a block on this wall that you're trying to build. And the idea is that over the next 10 to 20 years, you're going to build a really high wall. That is like what you're trying to accomplish, but you can't do it with cruddy bricks that fall apart and crumble apart because they're constantly broken. So, and also you want to do other stuff like that, unless you have plans to be a highest level competitor on the planet, just so you know, that's a rarefied company. If you have things like children that you want to hang out with and have energy to play with, if you have like pets that you want to hang out with, if you have other projects in your life, it's good to make room for them too.
Jiu-jitsu should be additive to your life.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of additive hobbies, of things that aren't taken. Obviously, like Matt said, if you want to be an expert in something, things have to be unbalanced a little bit. But jiu-jitsu should be an additive experience to your life. You should be coming away saying, you need jiu-jitsu in your life. You need that. This helps me with so many other aspects of my life.
So there you go, folks. So if you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and like. Please this would be the biggest.
Don't deload right now.
Yeah.
Load up hard.
Yeah,
on subscribing.
load on podcast subscribing. And make sure to share this with a friend, right? Like that honestly is probably the biggest thing somebody could do to help our podcast grow.
Sure.
Just, if you enjoyed this, share this with a friend. If you didn't enjoy us, let us know why. Shoot us an email at, info at
thegrapplingpodcast.com.
At thegrapplingpodcast.com. Find us in all your normal podcasting spaces. Where else can people find us?
The Grapple Pod. Grapple Pod.
Oh, you're doing that one. Okay. Yeah, and you can find us on Xbox at GrapplePod.
I feel like I shouldn't say instead of our 2 bards, I feel like we need an episode sometime to do a UFC. We should get to the UFC game and try to grapple on there. That'd be
funny. We only are allowed to grapple.
Yeah.
I've never played a UFC video game.
I played it a couple times, but it was fun. I remember I was like sick for 5 days or whatever, and I was like on the Xbox and I was playing it, and then the cool thing is on the EA games that you can take a picture of your face and it'll superimpose it onto the fighter.
Really?
So you will like look at them a little bit. So I had screenshots of me putting people in like
AI is going to get wild with
rear
that.
Naked chokes.
Oh my goodness, like I just thought about that.
What's that?
AI is going to get crazy with character design.
Yeah, it's probably true. You could probably look a lot like your character. Yeah, they'll probably do some sort of 3D scan of your face and then pretty soon it'll just be you.
You're in.
That'd be sweet.
All right,
cool guys. We will see you later.